Hello students, I hope you are all fine and in good health. In this audio presentation, it's a revision regarding the chapter The Address. So I will give you an overview, introductory overview related with the story, and I will explain the summary also to you side by side. So see, it is given the address, introduction of the lesson. Now what is the lesson all about? What we get to know from the story The Address? The story is about the human predicament that follows the pre-war and post-war period. Pre-war means before the beginning of the gruesome and the violent World War II, and post-war means after the war. Mrs. S, who was a Jewish girl, was actually a rich lady. That means the narrator's mother, she was a very rich lady, whereas Mrs. Doling was practically a non-Jewish lady. The girl of Mrs. S, that girl is actually the narrator of the story, had lost her house and her mother during the war because of the Second World War, and they were Jews, so unfortunately it was a tragic situation for them, because the narrator, not only their house was destroyed, but even she lost her mother also during the Second World War. And now after the war, the Jews were liberated. Liberation of the Jews took place and execution of the Nazi soldiers took place. So after she was been released or she was been liberated, she used to stay in a one-room flat. Now she decided to visit Mrs. Doling so that she can at least see her mother's belongings. So let me continue. The girl, daughter of Mrs. S, had lost her house and her mother during the war, and now she had decided to come back to take her possessions from Mrs. Doling, an acquaintance whose address was given by her years ago. And as we read in the story, that it was Mrs. S, the narrator's mother, who introduced the narrator with Mrs. Doling. Many years ago, the narrator's mother gave the address to the narrator. Which address? 46 Marconi Street. When she reached the house, the woman treated her with a cold reception. Mrs. Doling was not at all interested to receive the narrator with a smile. She was eager to avoid the narrator because Mrs. Doling, she was shrewd, she was very cunning, or rather to say she was very cruel, and she knew the right reason. She knew the reason why the narrator came to meet with her. Obviously, at the back of her mind, she realized the true intention of the narrator to visit her in order to see her mother's belongings. She decided to go back anyway because Mrs. Doling hadn't invited her inside the house. And then on her next visit, she met with her daughter, that is Mrs. Doling's daughter. Thank God, I told you previously, Mrs. Doling's daughter was not like her mother, who let her in and told her to wait inside. When she saw all the possessions in front of her, she couldn't connect with them and decided to leave the house. Now, the important thing is that Mrs. Doling's daughter allowed her inside the house, but the narrator felt very much uncomfortable. At the same time, she was shocked. Now, why the narrator was uncomfortable? Because this place doesn't belong to her, it belongs to Mrs. Doling. So she was a stranger, like an alien. She entered the house. And why she was feeling very, very sad in her mind, deep inside her mind, because her mother's belongings were kept in a very haphazard manner. And even Mrs. Doling haven't repaired some of the things that need to be repaired. And all these things actually pained the narrator, and without staying there for a longer period of time, she decided to move out of the house. So see the last line. When she saw all the possessions in front of her, she couldn't connect with them. And finally, the narrator decided to leave the house. Now, that was the intro part, or we can say the glimpse of the story. Now, let us come to the summary part. The summary part is the extended one. So, let me discuss the summary a bit. After ringing the doorbell of Mrs. Doling, who lived at number 46 Marconi Street, the protagonist was given a cold reception, and Mrs. Doling took much time to recognize her. But actually, she was a very shrewd and a cunning woman. She recognized the narrator after a After a pause, maybe after some time, she recognized the narrator and she was surprised because she never ever expected any member from the narrator's family will come back to meet with her, because she thought, and it is so unfortunate that the war occurred, and Mrs. Doling actually, she was so cruel that she thought that no one had actually survived from the narrator's family. That was so inhuman of her, that this shows that she was very mean-minded, that she never expected anyone to be alive from the narrator's family, and that was the reason she got a bit surprised when the narrator introduced her to Mrs. Doling. Mrs. Doling had thought everyone in the protagonist family was dead and asked if anyone else had come along with her. Now, Mrs. Doling initially thought that everyone from the house of the protagonist was dead, and she thought that no one was alive, and she told the narrator anyone else came with her, but the narrator told that no one was alive, only she herself was alive. Everyone died. The protagonist recognized her mother's green cardigan, which Mrs. Doling was wearing. She decided to go back to the train station because she was not allowed inside the house, as been told earlier to you all know by this time this, and thought about her mother and how she told her about Mrs. Doling, who was an acquaintance of her. During the war, Mrs. Doling would visit their house and take their possessions with her, as she didn't want them to get lost if they ever left the place. Mrs. Doling had a broad bag. Now, she was so mean-minded that during the war, or few months before the start of the war, she visited the house of Mrs. X, and in the name of friendship, she took all the precious things from her house, and she told her that let the war gets over, you can take all those things from me. But at the back of her mind, Mrs. Doling knew it very well that the family won't survive the war, and so she thought that these things will be destroyed, and so she tactfully managed to take those things from the narrator's mother. And one more physical information related with physical deformity has been given, that Mrs. Doling, she had a broad back, and if you have read the chapter, dear students, you get to know that her daughter also had a broad back. Now let me continue. The protagonist decided to go to Mrs. Doling's home to get back their belongings. When she rang the bell, Mrs. Doling's daughter answered the door. She let her in and asked her to wait in the living room. When they were crossing the passage, the protagonist noticed their Hanukkah candle stand that they had never used because it had been unmanageable. It was very heavy also. When she reached the living room, she was petrified, or rather to say, she was horrified. Why? Because the things were arranged in a very tasteless manner, or rather to say, in a very callous manner. It is written here, she saw all her mother's things that were arranged in a very tasteless manner. The furniture was ugly, and the room had a muggy smell, damp smell, and it made her disinterested, and she wanted to leave the place. And all this made her very much disinterested, and the narrator wanted to leave the place at the earliest. Mrs. Doling's daughter offered her a cup of tea, and the protagonist noticed the old tablecloth that had a burn mark on it. When the narrator was showing her the silver fork and spoons that actually belonged to the protagonist's mother, she jumped up and walked out of the house, because I already told you she felt very uncomfortable and alienated in that place. She was equally very much hurt because all those things were arranged in a very unprofessional, callous, and a very tasteless, and in a very haphazard manner. And it was very difficult for her to digest all those things, and so she thought that it is better for me to leave this place at the earliest. She decided not to visit the place again, as it brought memories of the past, and hence she decided to forget the address. Now the important thing is that she decided to forget the address, because this address, 46 Marconi Street, this is associated with sad memories. This is associated with haunting memories. This is associated with memories related with her precious things that belong to her dear departed mother. So she already promised, we find at the end of the chapter, that she will never come back to this place and she will make a new beginning to her life. She will start her life afresh. But as we know human psychology, that she will come back again. Why? She will come back to this address, though she never liked this place, she never liked Mrs. Doling at all. Why she will come back? There is a possibility she might come back again because her mother's things, prized possessions were inside the house. So maybe she will come back again to see it one more time. So there lies the emotional bond that she had with those things. So she desperately tried to snap it out, she desperately tried to break it all, but that emotional bond still lingers. And despite she promised to herself and she promised to the reader that she won't come back to this place, but we are in a doubt because we feel like she will come back again, because in that place the memories of her dear departed mother, particularly the memories related to her mother's beautiful things are there. So it might be she might come back to this place again to revisit the house 46 Marconi Street in order to see those precious belongings once again. So thank you students, that is it. I guess you will listen to this audio presentation. It's a revisional audio presentation. So if you at least go by this, if you at least listen to what I had dictated or I try to explain regarding this chapter, you will get a good overview of this chapter and it will help you in your exam also. So that is it, dear students. Please go through this audio presentation and clarify your doubts if any. Thank you students. Thank you all.